Hello and welcome. I am Belinda Tate, Executive Director of the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. I welcome everyone to this virtual celebration for the 2020-2021 Post-Baccalaureate Residence Annual Exhibition. This year's class of residents is unlike any other, and we are impressed with all that they have achieved. To the residents, congratulations! Each year since 2015, the KIA's faculty has welcomed a new group of residents in the Kirk Newman Art School, and with each class comes a sense of enthusiasm, passion, creativity, and warmth. However, this year's residents weathered additional challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In spite of all of that, these residents have tapped into the creativity that flows through our community, our organization, our exceptional faculty, and themselves. They have been sharing and teaching each other new skills and methodologies and sharpening the tools that will help them succeed for years to come. To this year's class of post-baccalaureate residents in the Kirk Newman Art School, thank you so very much for sharing your talents with us. I say, well done and congratulations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020-2021 Kirk Newman Art School Resident Exhibition opening. I'm Melina Wilcox, one of the residents here at the Kalamazoo Institute of Art, and tonight you will hear from all 8 of us residents, and we're going to share with you the artwork that we have been working on for the past 8 months that's now currently on display at the KIA. In one of the videos next to me, you should see a view of the gallery. It'll be under the Gabrielle Graves, and we'll give you a tour of each artist's art as they talk about who they are, what their work is, the processes that they use, the experiences that they've had in this residency, and maybe their future plans as well. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. Please type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We're going to save all questions until the end of the event after each artist has had a few minutes to talk. Before we get started with our first artist, though, I want to let you know that this exhibition is on view to the public at the KIA until June 6th. Gallery hours are Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sundays, 12 noon to 4 p.m. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to our first artist, Paige.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Brazovsky, and I am the Jewelry Metals resident for the KIA this year. I graduated from Western in April of 2020, and I graduated with a BFA in Jewelry Metals and a BA in Spanish. And then I applied for this residency and continued my works from there. So my works, as you can see displayed right above me, my main inspiration for my metalworks are healing with sound. And this ranges from anywhere like holistic healing as in meditation to healing with units and devices that are used in hospitals every day, like ultrasound. So while doing my research for this, I also discovered that recently scientists and doctors have been doing research on Alzheimer's cures using sound, which is incredible. So they use a sound that's 40 beats per minute, which triggers the gamma wavelength in the brain. And this triggers like the cleanup crew that comes in and helps kind of break up a lot of that blockage that the Alzheimer's leaves. And it actually gives the subject access back the memories. And they found in 50% of rats, this actually healed 50% of their memories that they lost. So from here, my frequency 1, which is the big neck or the shoulder and back piece. This, as you can see, was inspired organically from the structure of sound waves themselves. And if you peek a little closer, you can see a little stitching that I used to help emphasize physical healing. And I used traditional materials like copper and non-traditional materials for this, like embroidery thread. And I kept it symmetrical to also help simulate the symmetry of the body. And on my next piece, this is called Frequency 2. And this also kind of ties in with being a device that you can wear that helps assist you with that sound healing. So in this piece, I made an attachment. You can see the hanging bottom piece. You can actually put an AirPod in and then slip that piece over your ear and it stays, and you can listen to your meditation, you know, listen to all of those things that would help with healing. And this piece was used with traditional materials, silver and 14 karat gold. And then the next piece, endomysium. As a resident of the KIA, we also get to take classes for free and experiment with materials that we usually wouldn't get to experiment with. And in this case, I took a floor loom weaving class and I experimented with the loom, and I wanted to still tie the design back into the body. And this piece doesn't necessarily play with sound healing. However, I wanted it to reflect the endomysium, which is the part of the body that encapsulates the muscle fibers to keep them protected and to help with movement. And that is my work. And after this residency, I plan on continuing my studies and hopefully getting a degree in product design. And then from there, actually creating medical wearables that people use daily. But that's, you know, a bit in the future. And now I'm going to turn it over to Addie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adeline Muth. I am the sculpture resident for the KIA for this year. I am completely remote, so I'm coming to you from New York, actually, and I've done the residency completely remote thus far, which has been a challenge, but very exciting and fun at the same time. So a little about me, I did my undergraduate degree at University of Washington. I got my BFA from there. And then I did a year as a post-bac at Penn State as their sculpture resident there. So the two pieces that I have shown that I've been working on for this year are Honey Honey and Keeping for Later. Keeping for Later is on the left and is made of wood, beeswax, and yeah, so the beeswax is the cast jars and the wood framing, and the wallpaper in the back is actually from my childhood home. And then the piece on the right is called Honey Honey and is a video piece that I made, one of my first video pieces that involves crochet sacks and honey inside of them, and sort of a time of that. So yeah, so for this residency, I've been focusing on work that has to do with nostalgia and our interactions with memory, and the fragility of memory and the weight that humans put on the idea of memory. So we have a lot of reliance on it, and yet it's a very fragile method of preservation. So the materials I used with honey and with beeswax for both pieces sort of show that. Honey was used as a preservation method for years and is one of the oldest natural preservation methods, because it can't grow bacteria because the density of it. And so, yeah, and then beeswax as well. Wax is a very strange material that can go from fluid and a liquid into a solid. And I like the sort of the transformation that happens there with it. So yeah, I've loved my time at the KIA. It's been a joy to be here and take classes and learn and be around remotely with other residents. And yeah, so after this, I'm going to continue working for other artists. I've been a studio assistant for 5 years now to a variety of artists, and I'm learning furniture making as well. So I hope to continue that. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to pass it on to the next resident, Mel.
Hi, hello again. I'm Melina Wilcox. I am one of the print media residents here at the KIA. I actually grew up southwest of here, close to the lake. And I actually used to take summer camps here at this KIA when I was quite young. I have grandparents in the area that would take me. So it's been pretty cool to be able to continue my arts education now that I'm no longer 10 years old and in a different place in my career. I graduated from Western with a degree in sculpture in 2019. And my last year there, I started taking print classes and really fell in love with all of the different processes of printmaking, which is why I applied here to further learn and develop my print skills. And so in the past few months, I've been able to take classes on stone lithography, cyanotyping, and gum bichromate printing, which most of the works on display that I have up are gum bichromate prints. In this residency, I experimented a lot with incorporating quilt making techniques into the printmaking process. I eventually focused on using patchwork and applique. Both are very common quilt making processes as tools for collage. So all the works on display use those techniques, cutting printed images apart and sewing them back together. For me, quilts are these objects that are made to wrap our bodies for warmth and for comfort. There's the very intimate tactile objects. And in an era of mass production, there are also these very precious labor-intensive objects that tie back to tradition with generations of knowledge being passed down from person to person. And they really show a capacity for individual creativity and production. They're very personal objects and often made out of a lot of love. The works that I've made in the past 8 months come from thinking about the connections between surfaces of skin and fabric, where our bodies come into contact with quilts, the tactility of it, the safety and security and warmth that they provide, the love that's imbued into these objects, and the aesthetics, the patterns and the prints that make up patchwork quilts so visually interesting. They also express identity and individuality. So my works in this show reflect the body back as the quilt, transforming natural marks found on the skin into textile design, conflating these two things into one. The work that I want to focus on the most, which were actually the last works that I made during this residency, there was a long period of exploration while I was figuring out what the images on these prints were going to be. And towards the end, these are the ones that I ended up making. And they look at the play between organic and machine-made marks that are permanently set into skin. So moles, scars, tattoos, all of those things. And they are prints of my own tattoos that are collaged onto prints of my skin, but in places that the tattoos aren't actually located on my body, which was an interesting process for me because just looking back, the placement of tattoos on the body is a very specific thing, and it requires the consideration of a lot of things with the substrate, the skin, which is, it ages over time, it moves and it changes in size and elasticity, and it's three-dimensional with these curves. It's always in motion. But with a print, everything's flat and everything's on paper. So the formal decisions changed a lot. The placement of that tattoo still remains important, and it's permanent. It's a permanent choice once the glue dries and the stitching pierces the paper. But the focus is more about creating an interesting design that's more akin to textile design between the tattoo and the natural marks of the body. Rather than focusing on how the tattoo would fit around a three-dimensional curve, which wouldn't take those natural marks into consideration in the same way, because they're not as important as the three-dimensionality of the body. So both are surface design, but with very different considerations I combined them. And for me, these applique quilts with a tattoo are thinking a lot about the crafts of tattooing and sewing and how they historically have been really delineated based on gender. And so here I meld them together into one object, one image, where both exist simultaneously, sewing and tattoos, as well as femininity and masculinity, both exist simultaneously in the prints, both exist simultaneously in every person. And that finding that balance and that harmony between masculinity and femininity is what I've really been interested in investigating and depicting in my work. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to look at my work. As for my future plans, I don't really have any at the moment. You know, finishing up this residency and then moving on. And so I'll hand it over to the next person, Gabrielle.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Gabrielle Graves. I have had the privilege of being the photography resident here at the KAA for the last 9 months. And I'm excited to talk about my work a little bit with you tonight. I didn't start my timer here, so I'm going to do that again. But as you can tell, I am the photography resident. I went to the University of Michigan, graduated in 2017. And I have a BA in psychology with a minor in art and design. And a lot of my work is informed from my psychology background as well. And so here you see I have an installation, and there's actually a video that goes along with it as well. And what I had come into the KA with, it was a very specific project idea centering around the idea of head case. This term had lodged itself into my brain a little over a year ago now, at the beginning of quarantine, when I was spending a lot of time alone, a lot of time feeling kind of aimless and by myself, and thinking about identity and who I was in this realm of kind of existing and not existing in other people's spaces and my own space, since it was just, I was in this room of 4 walls constantly by myself and just thinking about this term head case. So I really just had the impulse to make a mirrored head case for my head and for my subject's head that I would then photograph and instigate different performative pieces that I would document. And also when I came into the KAA, they have a really wonderful darkroom program here, a darkroom and learning opportunities to use that darkroom. And that was something that I wanted to implement into my project and my work. It had been something I wanted to learn for a really long time. And then also just kind of tied so beautifully into the mirrored aspect and the warmth and the nostalgia and kind of this idea of anonymity and quietude. When you're in the dark room, you're alone for a long period of time, and you don't know what you're going to get always when you start taking these images with a film camera. It's not like digital, you can't see it right away, and at the end you're just kind of slaving over these chemicals and this paper and watching it appear like magic in front of you. And so it just all kind of very much tied together here. And in this first panel of my installation, I have 4 12 by 12 inch, actually they're not even 12 by 12, I think they're 7 by 7 actually, Holga images, which is actually a film camera that looks like it feels like a toy, and it looks like a toy. It's very plastic, very small, and it gives you these very soft kind of vignetted edges, and it adds to that kind of idea of memory and anonymity that I was thinking about a lot, and kind of like who we are in these places outdoors, in these places internally. And I had the opportunity to be in Arizona over the period of December. So my parents moved out there, so I helped them move during this time. And there was something about this background and this landscape that kind of added to this absurd and this surreal, this feeling of being alone, but also somewhere among other people and among this great landscape. And so a lot of my imagery kind of came from that time of wandering and wandering alone in these different hiking paths and everything, and looking at the cactus and this different landscape that was just so kind of desolate, and reminded me of my own like internal psychological spaces, especially in these times of quiet and quarantine and everything. And then I also wanted to, I was these are all kind of these outdoor external images. I also wanted to talk a lot about the internal space, and that's kind of where this project stemmed from, was being inside and being alone and thinking about also like selling my parents' house in that time. It was my childhood home, and thinking a lot about these family histories and kind of what made me me and what made other people themselves as well. And for me, there's a lot of, I mean, repetitive thoughts and things that go into this, and a lot of things that I get stuck on wallpaper, and also that term of wallflower, and feeling like you're just kind of pasted on these walls. And throughout my childhood home, there were a lot of Victorian style patterns and these floral patterns that kept repeating themselves, and you could get lost into and hyperfixate for hours. And so I also am an interdisciplinary artist. Here you can see the head case itself that I built out of mirrored substrate, and it places right on your head. And I also did I hand stamped that background there of the wallpaper, recreating the carpeting that was in the dining room and the stairs on my family childhood home. And in the back, there's a diptych image of a model of myself against a floral backdrop. And kind of this figure is looking into the void of this wallflower that just continues and continues. And then in the next panel, I have an image that I have very lovingly titled Blockhead, just speaking to that feeling. I think this one speaks to it kind of the best. And then I also, as I said, I'm interdisciplinary, and this is an installation. It's supposed to create an experience for anyone who's able to come see it in person. There's a video that becomes kind of this cacophony of sound, and it's just these different performative pieces of myself and others walking through a space with this head case on and interacting with the space that they're in, and becoming kind of influenced by the sounds and the colors and the warmth and the sunlight, but what you can feel mostly and what you can hear, you can't see when you're in this head case at all. And so it's really this kind of solitary experience that my subjects and then my viewers have as well. And that is all that I have to share with you tonight. And next up, we have Brooks. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooks K. Eisenbeis. I'm one of the Fibers residents this year, and I am a Kalamazoo native. I graduated from the University of Michigan in 2020 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a minor in writing. Much of my past work has been in fibers and printmaking, and it's focused on memory, personal ritual, and personal history, and non-linear narrative. When I started the residency, I had like a big intellectually dense project planned, and I changed my project idea a few times, and I got into the cycle of just thinking and not actually making anything. But the common theme in all of my concepts was this idea of growth in isolation and my relationship with space. When I had to move home from college due to COVID, I started exploring Kalamazoo in a way that I hadn't when I was growing up here. I was like walking aimlessly for hours at a time and just listening to music. The routes I took and the places I went began to mix with this music that I listened to and the thoughts that I had. In isolation and movement, I found myself being changed, trusting myself more. And I was focusing less on who I was and what I looked like, and more on what I was observing and where I traveled. Instead of just like thinking myself endlessly into a spiral, though, I actually had to start, creating things for this residency. So I wanted to experiment to actually figure out what I wanted to express. And the classes here really helped me with that. I learned a lot. I focused on creating works based on the photos that I took on my walks, and coupled that with some of the fleeting thoughts and like song lyrics and things like that that accompanied them. In my weaving class, I experimented with double weave quilting, and I created the blue piece that you see on the top right. I created this piece on the loom, and I picked up each individual stitch from a pattern that I created. So I was like literally creating this house from the foundation up. The yellow house, which is the piece right below it, is one of my favorite houses that I found while walking around Kalamazoo. This piece was created in a block printmaking class that I took this past term. It was my first attempt, my second attempt, but my first, experience with reduction prints, and it was a big learning experience for me. I really liked it. I added a stitch thought fragment above the scene just to kind of integrate a narrative that was playing in my head with this thing that I was seeing. My biggest project though for this residency is the purple embroidery piece that's like right next to it. This piece uses color and blank spots of white to make the image slightly surreal and warped while still maintaining a photographic quality. I tried to, be as photographic as possible in these pieces while still, maintaining whimsy, I guess. I also added another sort of thought fragment in the air there to I bridge the worlds of the mental and what you're seeing with your eyes. But mostly during this residency, I was able to continue this body of work that I've developed around memory, personal narrative. And I've also rediscovered my love of handcraft and slow, meticulous creative processes. I'd like to create more in this vein and yeah, just really slow down with my process and make some more, I don't know, pieces. It's been a great experience. I've learned a lot. I want to take more classes. And I just appreciate being here. I am going to hand it off to Tyler.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our virtual opening. I know we've all been really excited to share some of what we've been working on over the past 8 or 9 months. And yeah, so I'm Tyler Tentacle. I am one of the printmaking residents here at the KIA. And I studied art at Olivet College. I earned a bachelor's degree there, and I fell in love with printmaking during my studies. So much so, in fact, that I'm excited to announce that this fall, I'll be attending Ohio University to pursue a graduate degree in printmaking. So here at the KIA, I've been wanting to continue a body of work that I started about 2 years ago. And this body of work is really focused on place and perception and interaction. So most of my work consists of different, I describe them as vignettes of urban and rural landscape. So the first print here I have on the far right of the wall is titled The Edge of the Field. And this one here is titled Life After Death. It's a large woodcut that I'd worked on. This particular piece was inspired by like great juxtaposition, not only visually, but also perceptually. I think that a lot of people, including myself, sort of learned to think of somewhere like a cemetery as a very somber and quiet and lifeless place. But I like to challenge people's perspectives in my art, especially about the world around them. So this particular place, I was very inspired by this very juxtaposition. This place had all of these really vibrant, vigorous trees and all these overlapping forms of the branches. And when the light was cast upon the cemetery, there's this really beautiful shadows from all the branches that really dance with life and form kind of tendrils that undulate over the landscape. And I really loved that and how that also kind of juxtaposes with the very geometric and still forms of the graves themselves. The next piece I have is titled Burke's Clearing. And this piece I feel is very kind of archetypal for the Midwest, especially in rural areas. I'm very interested in my art and how we perceive our environment and how some of our preconceived notions can change or lead us to believe how things are in certain ways. So this piece was exactly that. It's again kind of a juxtaposition where we have this completely cleared and empty field in this single tree. And I was thinking a lot about the notion that certain things in our lives are more natural or less natural, more or less this idea of nature. A lot of us feel very separated from what would be nature when we're in, say, urban places. And there's this idea that in a rural place like this, it's much more natural. But I like this piece because I would argue just the opposite of that, and that this place is, there's a deep interaction from humans, right? So this is unused farmland that was completely deforested and cleared for agricultural purposes. And I think that interaction sort of goes against what we would otherwise think of this being a more natural place, what with the trees and the grass. The next piece on the right is very much of the same train of thought. And I'm thinking again of kind of this Midwest archetype. I live in a very rural community, and I relocated about 2 years ago when I started this body of work. And so I've been thinking a lot about just all these visual motifs I see and wondering about my relationship to them as well as their relationship to others. This piece is a gum bichromate print, and this was a new media to me that I got to learn about through a class at the KIA, which was a really wonderful experience. So gum printing involves essentially continuously exposing an image with layers of watercolor pigment. And it was really interesting to me because it reminded me of glazing and oil painting. And so once you've exposed the image said number of times, you have this composite image, which you can see now. And this piece is titled The Edge of the Field. And I really love working in the landscape genre. I'm a person who's always been very moved by what's around me, and especially when it comes to trying to be present. And I find that I notice a lot of beauty and interests once I kind of open my eyes and try to look closer. I see a lot of the world hidden in plain sight. Thanks so much for this overview of my work. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd like to turn the mic over to Sarah next.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Sarah Rio, and I was the ceramics resident at the KIA this year. I have a bachelor's degree in ceramics, fine arts ceramics from Western Michigan University. So I've been practicing for about 10 years in this medium. So I came into this residency with the goal of creating fermentation vessels to make foods like sauerkraut and pickles. I find my inspiration in a number of sources from around the world and throughout history. My intention is to both honor the history of food storage and fermentation, as well as to create a modern need for vessels of this type. The series is an exploration of form, function, and ritual. I enjoy fermentation and ceramics because they're both a perfect blend of science, art, and spontaneity. I'm always surprising myself with what I can create or destroy in these processes. And I've taken size into consideration with this body of work and how it relates to the overall function and presentation of these pieces. So the biggest vessel that you can see holds almost 400 liquid ounces, while the smallest holds about 30 ounces. And I use coils to build these pieces on a tabletop banding wheel, and I throw the smaller pieces on the potter's wheel. So sometimes I will start a bigger piece in like a plastic mold, just to ensure that it'll stay sturdy. I also use the potter's wheel to make all of the lids for these pieces and the pedestals that you can see. I'm interested in this pedestal. They're meant to elevate the pieces and give them sort of a ritualistic quality to them. The elevation of a form or a pedestal has been used throughout history. So I think it gives my pieces a sculptural quality, and I appreciate that in this series. All of my work shown features a waterlock lid, which is essentially a double-walled lip intended to hold water and act as a suction cup for the lid to sit in. It creates an anaerobic environment inside of the vessel, which is meant to keep oxygen out. So whatever you're fermenting inside of it has less of a chance to spoil. I'm very conscious of my glaze choices because I want to create a clean and safe environment for food to live in. All of this work is lined on the inside with a white staple glaze that does not have leaching properties, so it's safe to use. The They're all fired here at the KIA in our gas kiln. I'm very grateful to have been able to take part in this residency. I went into it with the hopeful expectation of getting a job at this facility, and I'm happy to say that I've begun teaching kids classes here. So as for the future of my work, I'm beginning to scale back on the sizes of my design with the intention of creating vessels for use in the modern everyday kitchen. So I'm still working out some of the kinks along the way, but I do plan on selling these fermenters soon. In my personal use, I find the most satisfaction using the smallest of the fermenters in this show. They're about maybe 1/4 of a gallon in the size. And I'd like to thank you for your time. So next I'd like to introduce Andrea from the fiber department. Thanks, you guys.
Hello, my name is Andrea Arts. I am the second fiber resident here at the KIA, and I graduated from the College of Worcester in the spring of 2020, and I've been in Kalamazoo since September. My body of work is all knitted materials. I primarily work in knitting. I'm really interested in handmade processes and the way that our connection to the process changes our relationship with the final objects. And I'm additionally interested in kind of the boundary between art and sculpture and craft and fine art. And so you can see with my top 2 pieces, I knit sweaters, but like how does the presentation of a sweater change, and how does our view of what it is, how does that change based on the context that it's in or the way that it's displayed. During my year at the KIA, I've been learning how to spin wool, which has been something I've been wanting to learn for a long time. I find that a connection to the materials is sort of, in addition to a connection with the processes, I think stepping farther back and being connected to the way that those materials were produced further extends our relationship with those objects and changes the way that we interact with them. So these pieces are made entirely out of secondhand yarn or yarn that I have spun. Yeah, and the text I have been, I'm interested in the way that text gets abstracted when you take it out of context. And I find that a lot of these text pieces have come out of a year of isolation, of being a young artist confused about my place in the world and what's going on and where I'm headed next. So I kind of get these phrases stuck on loop in my head. And then I knit it into a sweater, and it's this very repetitive process of thinking about the words and thinking about emotion and thinking about the final product. And they result in these pieces that are separated from my initial connection with the words. And the way what the words mean to me are different from how somebody might see them. So these phrases might spark a memory in your brain or have a specific context for the person who's reading it, but for me, they're coming from very specific ideas and feelings and moments. And I kind of try to pull the phrases from those moments and isolate them and abstract them so they're vague and people can project their own meanings onto them. Yeah, as for next, I'm going to continue to knit. I also work in clay, and I'm interested in pursuing sculpture and just continue to test the boundaries of fiber and exploring those limits of what is a craft process and what is a fine art process, and sort of just exploring those boundaries of how we view objects based on the materials that they come from, and furthering a connection with materials to ultimately extend the life of the objects that we're using. Yes, I think next we are going to go into a Q&A. And so I will go out and meet the other residents. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the Q&A section below. All right. Hello, everyone. We're getting ready to take your questions.
We have one question that asks Brooks, how did your relationship change with Kalamazoo after your project?
Okay. I'll try to project here. I think that I just by exploring new parts of the city, it felt like a new city to me, you know, like growing up in one neighborhood and really only exploring that neighborhood, going from that to walking like, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles one way in a day. You really see a lot of parts of Kalamazoo that you've never seen before. And it sort of like expanded my little world, even though was COVID. We can't really go anywhere. It felt like my world was a little bit bigger. And I think that was comforting when everybody felt cooped up. But it also just sort of showed me how little of everything I've seen. It's questioning everything I knew. But it was a great experience. I still walk a lot. I'm gonna walk a lot more this summer because the weather is gonna get nicer.
Okay, and then could you also step a little closer when you answer? And Andrea, they want to know, what is your advice for artists struggling to incorporate words and phrases? How did you choose those words?
Yeah, the words kind of just come whenever I have a whole list in my phone that come when I'm about to go to bed and I write them down. And the ones that I choose to pursue are those that kind of get locked in my head and I repeat them over and over again. With these pieces in particular, I was kind of interested in gruesome words, things that felt like in contrast to the soft, colorful materials. So words like guts and pain and bones and flesh. I was really drawn to over the course of this process. Yes, I do the best for advice. I think it's the things that you can't stop thinking about. Those are the words that I most drawn to when they play on me in my head.
Tyler, they're curious about your subject choice of trees. Would you elaborate more on that? Also, I'll follow up by saying, going into your master's, do you think you will continue with this series or will you start exploring new subject matter?
Sure. Well, I think trees are such a ubiquitous thing that we see around the landscape, especially for me being that's generally my subject. I look at them a lot personally, not only because like literal bringer of life, but I love the fractals that are created in between spaces, between the branches. And something to me about all that overlapping of form and direction is just like very visually satisfying. So there's that aspect, and then just the general prevalence of these things in the world around us. As far as graduate schools, I think when I started studying there will be a continuation of a lot of the same thoughts, a lot of the same concepts, but I know that my work's going to evolve and change pretty considerably as well. So I think there will always be trees in my prints.
Great. Sarah, how did you choose your surfaces and your finishes for your work? What was your process behind that?
So I guess there are anywhere between 3 and 7 places. These pieces individually, I sprayed all of my legs onto pieces. And I was kind of thinking about, I guess, like Michigan and sand and natural colors, how to, I don't know. I mixed up a few places myself that I picked, and one of them was a crystalline glaze. I'm really enjoying working with that. And I was thinking about nature, water, and how to make it prevalent in the work.
This is a general question up for anyone to answer. What are some new skills that you learned outside of your main medium while you've been working at the KIA? And how have you applied those to your work?
So I generally use metals in my works, but I took that floral removing class, and I was able to do a whole piece in a whole medium, and it inspired me to use thread in my other piece as well. So that also kind of helps tie in that woven piece into my show today.
Lovely. Brooks, could you explain a little bit of your color palette choice and the concept behind why you chose those?
Yeah, absolutely. So In my senior thesis, which I did last year, I was working on cyanotype, and I was working on a very limited color palette of like white and blue and red. And I started this residency with that sort of same color palette, doing a lot of cyanotype stuff, a lot of blues, and then I just got absolutely sick of it. And I got fatigued with limiting myself so much, and I decided that I was just going to go insane. And yeah, so I thought that for this like bigger embroidery piece, the purples, I just saw them and they excited me, you know? And I think that added sort of like otherworldly quality that otherwise it wouldn't have had. It might have been a little bit more mundane. And for the yellow house piece, the house was this like beautiful sort of like seafoam blue paneling with these tan bricks. And I just thought that yellow would go really well with this seafoam color that was already there, and just like upping the saturation on everything. I'm someone who's like very afraid of color. So I was just trying to be less afraid.
Gabrielle, they loved your influence of psychology on your photography. Do you have any future projects in the works, and do you plan to continue to explore these themes in your future works?
Yeah, I do plan to continue to explore these themes. I think this is the start of a larger project that I want to continue. I want to make a head case that you can see through ideally the 1 years. I would love that, and have more performative aspects of it. I also I've been working, I love bookmaking, so I want to move forward with some bookmaking related to this project and also related to other projects that I've kind of been inspired by. And psychology is just like mental health actually too. And it's Mental Health Awareness Month as well. So just to put that out there is something that influences my work and my thought process a lot. So I do a lot of work that is centered around these idioms of mental health that turn them into then leads kind of certain narratives, and head case was one of them. In the past, I've worked with like Gone Bananas and Happy Pills and things like that. So I'm probably going to continue on this trajectory a bit. I also would love to get into more community-based mural projects. I would like to get back into painting a little bit more as well. So I'm just very big book on a lot of project ideas at this point in time.
Mel, earlier you talked about that you got your degree in sculpture. You then referenced the way imagery laid on a 3D surface compared to a 2D. Could you talk a little bit about how your background in sculpture may have overlapped or influenced your series?
I don't know if it did influence the series as much as it might have. I think when I started this residency, I really tried to ignore most of what I've done in the past because so much of my past work is sculpture and installation. And so moving from primarily 3D to primarily 2D work, I was like, I'm gonna ignore all that because it's completely different. So I think I struggled to find the imagery then. Yeah, I don't know. I tried to make such a harsh split from it. I don't know if there was much influence because it was really deliberate to make that differentiation work.
Sure. Did you enjoy that change to 2D? Was that an exciting change in your work?
It was hard. I think I've learned a lot about my artwork and about why I choose to do certain things because I spent so much time in this residency trying to figure out what I was making and why I was making it, and that I didn't want to make what I've made before. Where am I going with this sentence?
That was a hard one.
What was the question that you actually asked me just now?
Did you enjoy your change from your 3D background?
I think I enjoyed what I've learned from it. The process of doing all this stuff was very hard in the moment, but looking back, like I can see everything. So I enjoy it but now that it's done.
So this is to
Yeah.
This is to everyone. We'd like to know if you would recommend the residency program to other people considering it, and if so, what would you recommend, or why would you recommend it?
Yeah, speaking as like a remote resident, I know that this is kind of their first time doing remote residency, and I've been enjoying it. I think it's definitely like a good option, and they've like supplied a lot of options there. So yeah, definitely would recommend it to help just grow. And I've been able to dive into like several other things such as drawing and bookmaking while also during the residency. So it's like can expand your art making as well. So.
And you did those online?
Yeah, I did them all online. So yep.
Do you think that helped you reach out to different mediums or different areas in the KIA that you may not have explored if you were not virtually?
Yeah, I think so, yes, because I could have seen myself much more like rooted in just sculpture and or maybe ceramic. But yeah, because of the virtual aspect, I was able, I feel like, to expand a little bit more. So yeah, that was really nice.
Okay, guys, that was all of our questions, unless anyone else has anything else they want to add in the Q&A.
What?
That was it for the Q&A. I think that all the questions have been answered. You guys did a great job answering them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I can see it. No, you're fine. No, thank you. Thank you for joining us virtually tonight to see our show and learn a little bit more about each of us and our work and the KAA as well. Of course, like thank you to the KAA and the Kirk Art School for their support and having us here for the last 9 months. And thank you to our mentors and our instructors who have supported us this entire time. I mean, we appreciate you so much and couldn't have done it without you. And a special thank you to Courtney Nelson as well, who was helping behind the scenes and made this night possible as well. She was doing the Q&A beautifully there, so thank you, Courtney. And again, if you'd like to come see the show in person, you are more than welcome to and able. The KA is open to the public Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Huh? Yeah, Sunday 12 p.m. to 4 p.m., right? Okay, cool. Right. And our work will be up until June 6th. Again, we'd love to have you come see it. If you have any questions, you can reach the KIA via phone or email, and that information is on the KIA website at kiarts.org. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.
Oh, it's still going.